Hello, hello. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody. I want to welcome you all once again to today's webinar. As always, we strive to bring you a variety of stories from strategies to success stories, individuals, notable people to talk about. And today we have a very distinguished guest with us. Today in this webinar, we are going to be talking about the essential tools for IMGs, how you can strategically plan your residency. And we have again our guest, very distinguished from IMG to US physician, we have Dr. Gabriela Jennered. Hello, Dr. Gabriela. Are you here in the webinar with us?
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to participate in this, especially given that, not so long ago I was in the exact, same place as many of you guys.
Wow, no, and thank you so much for taking part in this webinar, Dr. Gabriela.
Mhm.
And again, there's so much to talk about today. I have so many questions. I'm very excited to dive into today's webinar. Just firstly, with my first question, I am seeing here that you are from Poland. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow, nice. And as some of you guys know, if you guys have done webinars, or excuse me, yes, if you guys have done orientations with us, I actually just finished an orientation session for the individuals who are doing research modules with us. And something that I love to highlight in our research modules is I love connecting with individuals from all over the world. I myself currently, I am here in Texas. I am in West Texas. I always enjoy asking people either where they're from or where they're currently at or both. And so I find it amazing, Dr. Jenner, that you're from Poland and at the moment, if you don't mind me asking, you are in Illinois.
Yes, I'm in Rockford, Illinois, which is about an hour and a half from Chicago,
Mm.
uh, going like northwest. That's where I did my residency.
Oh,
Ended up
nice, nice.
staying.
Wow. And again, from Chicago, excuse me, yes, from Illinois, from Poland to Illinois. Again, it's quite the journey, both
Mhm.
personal and academic. I am curious to know if you don't mind sharing a little bit more with us, Dr. Jenred. Just really,
Yes.
again, that journey where from transitioning over both geographically, academically, personally, if you don't mind letting us know again about that journey of yours, I'm really eager to hear all about it.
Sure. It's a long story, I'm sure, like for most IMGs, it's long journey, not just in terms of like, time, it's a big sacrifice. But so I went to Medical University of Warsaw in Poland, and then graduated from the medical school. So I think it's the number one university in Poland currently. And I think it's important to mention, when you have really high grades in Poland, you can get into a program that is free. So, for example, I don't have any student loans, which really has tremendously helped me, as a physician. So, the medical school in Poland is 6 years, and then you don't go to college, you just go from high school to medical school. And then after that, I actually did take a gap year during my medical school between the fifth and the sixth year. And then in that time, I ended up passing step one, step two, I think both CKCS, yes. So I completed all my steps in that gap year, as well as I did clinical rotations in the US. And also like throughout medical school, so our medical school is set up such that every summer, like every summer, we have like 3 months off, but then we also required to do clinical rotations. So I think every summer, since pretty much like, after my first year, I have done observerships, and then once you're in your clinical year, which is like third year, then I was able to do electives, and they've always been in the US. And then when I graduated, so I graduated in May of 2020. This was around the pandemic time. So I actually was able to graduate a little earlier because I got, my finals, and then I ended up moving to Chicago. August of 2020, and then in September I started a research fellowship at the University of Chicago. And that was at the transplant department. I did research fellowship at in islet cell transplantation, and then I marched to residency in Rockford internal medicine. And then obviously, like I finished my research fellowship pretty much like right after I ended up starting residency. And then I graduated from residency September of 2024. I had like extended by 3 months because I had my daughter in residency. And so I ended up like, taking like 12 weeks off. And then I started my attending job and I work in primary care setting, which I'm going to be actually transitioning from. But currently, I've been working in a primary care setting. It's a rural area, but I feel like it has a lot of positives. And I work for UW Health, which is a large organization, University of Wisconsin. But now, they also have their location in Rockford. And yeah, so it's been like almost a year and a half in an attending job, and residency doesn't even compare to it. But like as you go through your journey, you'll see then it just some things get better, some things gets not necessarily worse, but you just assume a lot more responsibility, as you go along. It's just part of it.
Wow. No, that's it's quite the journey, Dr. Gabriel. And
Hmm.
how's attending life so far for you? What do you think?
It's I think, and in general, I'm a very busy person. Like I've always, like when I went to medical school, I did medical school, and then at the same time, I feel like I had two med schools because I was preparing for USMLE, and then doing clinical rotation. So I've always had like multiple things going on at the same time. So if
Mm,
I thought I was, everybody tells attending life, everything gets better, you get more time. That hasn't really been true for me, and
mm,
because I also, in addition to my attending like full time clinical job, I'm also working as a faculty in a residency program in California, which is in the Southern California, and then I'm going to be transitioning there to be an APD.
mm, mm,
Um, and then yeah, so it's been it's been really busy, but I say, there's a lot of positives, and as you get more autonomy and the independence practice definitely can be very fulfilling, or at least where there again, there are always going to be difficulties when you're the one making the decisions.
mm,
But it's been interesting. It's been quite a journey. I passed my also like in my so I didn't take my boards, after residency. So like in order to take your boards as an internal medicine doctor, I think family C is different. Family medicine, you can take your boards, I think, during your last year.
mm,
As an internist, you have to you have to graduate, and then you can take your boards. It's in August. But
mm.
because, I had my maternity leave, so I had to wait 1 year. So like that first year, as an attending, I was also studying for boards, and so it was a lot. But I don't know, I feel like I'm in a really good place, and then there's just more and more opportunities, as you go along.
No, no, definitely. And it definitely sounds like it is a busy time, but the good kind of busy at the end of the day.
Yes,
Again, with
for sure.
everything, yes, with everything that you're doing. And it seems you're very much interested in the academic education like component of medical education medicine, correct?
I am, but I have to tell you, so I have to so it's kind of like to backtrack, like because you asked me about
Yes,
my journey. So
yes,
I
yes.
was not planning to be an internist. I actually did not like internal medicine, in
Mhm,
medical school. My
mhm,
least favorite rotation probably of all. But then I was I was like on a path to become a surgeon, or at least like general surgery resident, so
mhm.
all my clinical rotations actually have been in surgery.
Wow. Uh-huh.
I haven't done a single IM rotation, and
Mhm,
then decided more like I think my toward the end, like fifth or sixth year, I think it was after I actually did electives. I did two electives in transplant surgery at the University of Chicago, and I also did colorectal surgery at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. They were
mm,
I really enjoyed it, but it really it gave me like a glimpse of like what a residence life would be and
mhm,
intern life. And at the time I was not single, like I'm married and I was in a relationship then. So it just seemed like a huge trade-off, or even a bigger sacrifice that already has been. So I
Mhm,
decided that I'm going to just do actually gastroenterology, because I thought, it's procedure. So that's
mhm,
why I am. And that's why, so I was actually, and
mhm,
then for residency, I was also going to pursue GI fellowship, there for like my research, projects and publications. But then, things, I think once you're practicing, especially, like when you're practicing, even as a resident, I think the idea of yourself changes. You have to be able to kind of reevaluate, as you learn new things about yourself as a person, as a physician. So then it's changed for me. So I wanted actually to, I I do enjoy internal medicine and the scope of it, like the broadness of it. And so I actually wanted to practice medicine in full scope, so that's why I decided to. And then I also didn't want to do more training.
mhm,
Um, and then, um, so then I was thinking, so I ended up going into my attending job, which is primary care now, which is totally non-clinical, not teaching. I was thinking, I need to get my experience first in order to teach somebody, and
mhm,
at least in a clinical setting, where you're supervising residents or teaching them, as you see patients. And then, my former program director, he opened up a new residency program, and I just did like guest lectures for them, and then ended up actually really enjoying it.
mhm,
And that's why I'm now involved with the residents. I actually did not expect that I'm going to be teaching.
mhm,
Um, but I've always enjoyed research, because a lot of my background is in research.
mhm, mhm,
Because I wanted to be a surgeon, and then I wanted to be a gastroenterologist. You
mhm.
have to have a lot of research, and you have to show it as early as, early on, right? The
Yes.
dedication.
Mhm,
So I have a lot of background in that, but, I ended up going in a different path. But, I think where the teaching and research are similar is that it gives you an outlet. I think a lot of like our American healthcare can be disappointing when you are working, in it, and you're, held accountable to certain standards, like, quality measures, and, basically you just, it's corporate medicine, and it can be very dissatisfying,
mhm,
I
mhm.
think if you also have teaching, along with it, and you're in maybe in academic institutions, then you can see more of the purpose why you even went into it in the first place.
Mhm. Oh, definitely, yes. And I think it's a very interesting turn of events. And if anything, you read my mind, Dr. Jenner, because that was gonna be my follow-up question as well.
Mm-hmm.
You being in academic medicine in a,
Mm-hmm.
your attending journey, it is amazing, but also the journey to get there, as a medical student, how was that trajectory like? And again, it's
Mm-hmm.
very interesting and very important that you highlight that change from surgery to internal medicine,
Mm-hmm.
or not necessarily having internal medicine as the primary specialty, again, because a lot of individuals going into medical school,
Mm-hmm.
they think they have to, firstly, they think they have to know what they're going to be doing
Right.
afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
You're going into medical school, I'm already going in with the mind of I have to be a pediatrician because that's what
Right.
I set myself out to do in the beginning, or
Yeah.
I have to be an infectious disease because that's what I established in the beginning. And so,
Mm-hmm.
just really that journey of learning, not just the academic component of it, but that personal component, really learning about yourself is a very important part of medicine that not many people talk about. So again,
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that you highlight on that pivotal change, and also on how external factors can come into again influencing that change. And I'm really happy. It seems you found that ideal balance right now between your professional and your personal life pursuits and so forth. And again, just one thing that really stood out to me, though, as you
Mm-hmm.
were mentioning trajectory in preparing for surgery, but now we're talking about being an attending in IM. I'm curious to know, firstly, what what changes you had to go to, as it is. I know
Mhm.
as IMGs, we undergo a lot of challenges. I'd be eager to hear about any changes and challenges that you endured as an IMG, but also as one who towards the residency component of it. You chose to switch over because a lot of
Mhm.
people sometimes mention if I don't see an IM background, there's a chance that I might not get accepted. You
Mhm.
know, how have- have those challenges worked to your favor or you shaped them to your favor? I'm really interested to know, Dr. Jenrith.
Um, that's a really good question, and I do want to say, because I've actually participated in interviewing candidates for this year for our incoming class of the PGY one. So then the new program that I'm faculty and I'm going to be an APD, this is going to be a second class, because it's so new.
Mm,
So I can tell you, like when we review the applicants, and we look at the applications, yes, of course, we want to see, an interest in, internal medicine. But then one of my mentor, from University of Chicago, he told me, like, I asked him one time, what is it then, what is it that I need to be successful? And like, like what it will help me succeed, as a future resident and then as a doctor, like in the US. And he said that, like as long as you are, reliable, honest, and on time, you're gonna beat like 90% of your competition, And then I do have to say, when we're looking at the candidates, and interviewing them, because yes, you look at the application, but then ultimately, you wanna get to know people. I mean, I know it is also very hard, to meet somebody over like 20 minutes interview, but you want to get a sense of a person that, are they going to will you get along with them? Can you trust them? Will they have your back? Will they care for each other, as a team? So, of course, we want to see interest in internal medicine, and then I think, I'm just thinking, that's what people like evaluated me too, through that perspective. And I just hope that, in the personal statement, you get to justify or, defend yourself, or you can flash it out, like, why there are certain things that have happened, in your medical journey, right? So then, when I wrote my personal statement, I did, touched on surgery and then, like why I made that change, right? So you have an opportunity to explain, but at the same time, it is really, and I think a lot of attendings do understand that when you are going into medical school, even as a medical student, you can have interest in different things, but you evolve as a person, and then you evolve, as a medical student and then later on as a resident. So I think we all recognize that things change, and actually it would be, I think, more detrimental to you as a person than, you will ignore what you've learned and then just went along with, okay, so I'm just going to do a surgery anyway because I already started, and I don't want to disappoint someone,
mm, mm,
I've had that fear actually, because my mentors also have changed, but I have like distinct maybe six mentors that I've had, and then some that I have to. I mean, I keep in touch with all of them. Also, big advice to you guys: you want to make sure you take care of your network, and especially your mentors. People who helped you. You want to keep in touch with them and forever, for as long as you can. And then the mentorship is going to evolve too, because if, for example, the surgeons that I have worked with, I have three surgeons that are my mentors. And I had to tell them, when I made that change, when I made the decision, and it was really hard for me, because I did feel that I was disappointing them, but I think, when you have a good mentor, all they want for you is that you're happy, and you're successful. So I think those people would understand the change. It's just that I think we internalize, if I know because that's what I went through, like I felt like I failed in some way. I felt the same way when I went to tell my program director then I was pregnant. I felt like it was a failure on my part. I think a lot of women feel that way. I felt like, it was a failure to pursue just internal medicine and not go to a fellowship. I still sometimes question it too. But I do
mm,
feel like I made good decisions. I think you
mm,
do have to reevaluate where you are And you just, like when you're applying, you just have to be honest and then, be able to communicate all of this, when you're interviewing. And we do a lot of us, because I mean, in an interview, is we things that we will flesh out or like we point out is, is somebody like if you have a lot of insight, and understanding why you made certain choices, that really is more important, than just having the whole application be about internal medicine. Of course, like again, the interest is important, but really we're just looking for a person that is caring, again, like reliable, and a good team member and somebody who cares, So I think everything else, like again, same with the knowledge. I mean, we can teach you, what you need to know. You have to have a foundation of knowledge, but then there's other things you need to learn in residency, right? So you have to be a certain kind of person. And so I didn't, the other things is I would think secondary, to most programs.
Mhm.
But then, of course, like if you want to get into programs that are, like academic or research, and I know a lot of them have bias, like for example, University of Chicago, and it's unfortunate, they tend to take their own medical students, their own residents.
Mhm.
um, so yes, some places maybe not an option, but people have told me that it's impossible to even become a, like get into residency in this. And a lot of people told me that. I'm sure you guys all hearing that and heard it, which is not true.
Mhm.
But then there are some things, that are not impossible, but it will be, a more of challenging, to get into, academic institutions, but I mean, like big names, big academic institutions. Again, not impossible, but then you want to at least be aware of that.
Mhm. Right, right. No, and it's very good to look out for that, Dr. Jenner. And I really appreciate that you pointed that out. And again, I really appreciate the insight just overall on what goes into a successful applicant, an ideal applicant. And I really like the way you related that again with your story as well. If you don't mind me asking, Dr. Jenner, is there
Hmm.
anything you wish you would have known earlier about the match process when you were undergoing the match?
Above the match process
Mhm.
itself.
Yes, yes.
um, I think, I was really so I think now you guys have a lot more resources out there, I think because I mean when did I so I've started medical school 2013, right? So it's been like
Mhm.
so what you have available, you have a lot more than I did. And I think the most help was really hearing other people's stories, So I feel like when I've had people that I've encountered, or like very few people from my university. I was the only one actually in my class, like of 300 something people that ended up going to the United States.
Wow. Uh-huh.
But I have some people that I've asked for advice because they've either been going through it too, or or they've already gone through the process. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I think just having somebody that has gone through it and then can guide you. I feel like I was really well prepared,
Mhm.
because I was reading, I don't know if it was at Reddit then, I don't know, but it was just like, they're like far, like
Mhm.
these are really important things. And then I would just compile all the notes I find, like how to prepare for step one or step two. And then I would use that as my guidance, but I would just do a lot of, either reading about it, free people experiences. And then, like anybody that I would meet, I would also ask.
Mhm.
Or like when I did my electives, then I would ask also attendings that were IMGs, and then they would either share their studying materials with me or tips. So I think I was really well prepared. One thing that, I couldn't have known
Mhm.
until just like recently working, on the faculty with the residency program is how they
Mhm.
actually ask questions,
Mhm.
there is, obviously, I think there's a lot of questions like behavioral type of interviewing that a lot of the residency programs are doing. Then, I think that we do get those questions. And so I did prepare all these questions myself, like 100 of inter responses and practiced it. But,
Uh-huh.
like some of the insight and some of the way that like what are some of the things that people look for in candidates, I think I've
Mhm.
only learned on the other side of it, so maybe I wish that I knew that, but I didn't have anybody to ask that was on faculty, or maybe I'm sure, every program is a little different, but I do believe that, like looking for, because for example, okay, I'll tell you, give an example for
Mhm,
like when I interview candidates, and I think I was interviewing like three at a time.
mhm,
I would, I would prepare as a faculty. So I would, it would probably take me like an hour, to go through all of those three. And the things that I at least pay attention most was I did look at the research a little bit, but mostly like, are you a first author, I didn't necessarily care to ask them about the research unless I was really interested in the topic.
mhm, mhm,
Um, but then, I was also interested, people have interest outside of medicine, if so, like what it is. A lot of the letters of recommendations look very much the same, and I would
mhm,
still go for them because there will be some that still stand out. Same with the personal statement. There are a lot of them, I don't know, I know that now we use AI, so a lot of them are going to look very much the same, but then there are some that I still remember, and those are the top candidates. They were very much written by the person and something that really stood out, but I think that's just like a higher level, you can that's what we're looking for, like emotional intelligence, where it's like you're basically trying to to see if it's a person that you can work with, are they going to be a good team member, going to be caring for each other, and then how are they going to be with other people. So I think some of the things, and a lot of people also, like some programs, especially the community programs, they pay a lot of attention to, like, will this person end up staying in the area? I didn't realize that ahead of time.
mhm, mhm,
So I think like just going be on the other side, then I have a little more insight, like how the actual process goes.
mhm, mhm.
And then what are the other attendings saying? What do you look at? People obviously look at scores. I mean, that's well known. But it's not all that weighs into the final decision.
Mhm, mhm. Got it, got it. So I wow, it really it really is a lot of just
Yeah.
information that has been provided to us, Dr. Generate. And
Mhm.
again, I really do appreciate everything that you've been sharing with us so far. I'm just gonna recap really quick, and again,
Yeah.
just point out some of the more important things that some of the most important things that you've mentioned that have really been stand out, which is really keeping track with your network, staying connected with your network.
Mhm.
And by that, even when you were undergoing your respective match journey, connecting with people who have been going through this journey so that you can find that sort of guidance and relatability. I can
Mhm.
definitely understand that as well, being myself a first gen individual. And
Yeah.
again, just not having anybody above me or ahead of me, so to say. So that
Mhm.
definitely is something important to establish. And touching up on the ideal applicants, and now you being on the other side and assessing those applicants. Again, it's good that you mentioned, essentially that the scores at the end of the day are going to matter. But I think really what I'm curious about also is some of those standout applicants. I know you
Mhm.
mentioned you look for people that you want to work with. You look for those who, in addition to having that clinical aptitude, they have that humanitarian aspect to them as well. And I know that you also touched up on other activities like
Mhm.
extracurriculars.
Mhm.
Research is definitely one of them. I'm curious to know what have been some standout stories. I know that you mentioned in the personal statement or
Mhm.
in the letters of reg. What have been some standout moments that made you say, that this isn't something I see very often, or this person
Mhm.
is definitely going to be in my
Mhm.
program. Have you? What have been those situations like?
So there's one, I think that was the strongest applicant. So he's an American, he's an American medical graduate, but he um he majored in philosophy,
Mm,
so like
mhm,
bachelor's, he didn't do anything like science related.
mhm,
And you can tell like just by and I can press like I can actually, I think I have his personal statement saved, but he you can tell that he wrote it, and very much, like if you guys are familiar with narrative medicine, so the essay, like you can tell that he is a very good writer, and he quoted like Dostoevsky. So I think like that, just bringing on, or just like fleshing out that you have interests outside of medicine, but then make you more like a whole person. I think that's one thing that stood out. And then, when you're, and I think, I don't remember exactly. I just remember that he quoted Dostoevsky. I remember that there was a lot of like insight and reflection, like reflecting back on experiences, and a lot of the internal medicine, and I think other personal statements as well. They just all say the same thing, that I want to do internal medicine because I like continuity of care, because I like problem solving.
Mhm.
It's all the same thing.
Mhm.
So, and of course, you're going to bring up examples of patients because they want you to do it. But I think his way of like putting it and like bringing in literature into the essay, really stood out. And it wasn't just me, it was, one of the other attendings also pointed it out. And both of us, I thought, was the strongest candidate. And then he was just, during the interview, it was like very humble, and very pleasant. So there's that kind of thing, obviously we all are different personality wise. And then other things, when other candidates, one a lot of recommendation that really stood out is that the attending, I think, spent a paragraph explaining a critical care attending, explaining that normally he doesn't write any letters of recommendations for people. And, he had a child that was just born, and he has another, child at home, so he has like, busy family life. Plus, he's a obviously critical care doctor. So even despite, like recent family events, he thought it was really important to communicate, and write this letter for this candidate because he thought it was exceptional. So I think then introduction, really like made me pay attention, to the whole personal statement.
Mhm.
Um, because it could give it more credibility,
Mhm.
and then what are some other things?
Mhm.
Um, there was another person, so it's there, the extracurricular activities we also look in, so for example, any type of volunteering, leadership role.
Mhm.
And then, like then you want to ask people like what they actually did in it. I have one candidate, I think she was a coordinator for like victims of sexual abuse or something like that,
Mhm.
and she got, ask her like, how she, as a medical student, I think this is a really high level. You have to be a certain kind of person to handle it, and so she went for like, I think training, how to, um, help the patients, how to interview them, how to even talk to them. So that, I think that speaks for itself as an example of that this person probably has like a high level of emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
and then there's some people, when they're when I ask questions, and then that's I think how most of the behavior ones are written. Like things that was stood out for me is when most people will bring up patience, and of course, like that's most what we talk about the interview because we want to know like how you're gonna be with people. But I also things that was stood out for me is somebody just takes care of other people, and this could be just another medical student,
Mhm.
helping somebody out that maybe you don't like, or maybe they did something wrong to you before, but then you're still gonna help them out anyway, so
Mhm.
those things, and then I have some people that, um did like, photography on the side of med school, and
Mhm.
somebody like help, people around their family restaurant, so I think these are interesting things, but then what they really point out at is that people have some extra skills that maybe have some leadership, potential,
Mhm.
which is obviously really important in residency, you know.
And have you seen again those individuals with unconventional, unique, non-clinical hobbies or
Hmm.
pursuits, we'll say, have you seen that being reflected in their performance as a resident or as somebody who's rotating in your facility, if you don't mind me asking, versus somebody
Oh,
who might have?
so I will see, I can give you a follow up because,
Sure,
we
sure.
just had the first class. And
Got it,
then
got
this
it.
year
Mhm.
this is my first time actually interviewing people. So we'll see.
Sure, got it.
Um,
Hmm.
but, it's not like you have to have these, those are just
Right.
maybe like interesting things.
Hmm.
Um, I think, even if your application's average, like
Hmm.
average scores, average, we'll still, decide based on actually when we're talking to you in person,
Hmm. Hmm.
and what kind of person you are, and how you interact, with us. So The application, of course, is something we do review, but then, at the interview is when we like to get to know you as a person, and something, that some attendees mentioned, which is more of like a negative thing about a candidate is when, I didn't really get to know him. Like, I don't really have a sense of what kind of person they are.
Mhm, mhm.
So you want to be able to, in whatever that way it is, get to know yourself, or like have
Yeah.
some way to communicate. And I know it's under a lot of stress, so this may also, we people do take it into consideration. But the interview is really, want to know it's but people are trying to get to know you as a human being.
Mhm. Yes, yes. No, definitely. And as you mentioned at the end, that final step, it ultimately comes down to compatibility, seeing
Mm-hmm.
how well you speak and how well you connect with the program, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, disingenuously or trying
Yes.
to connect, but at the end of the day it's more so of a match, the way I'm
Right.
understanding, no
Oh
pun
yeah.
intended, if
Yeah, yeah.
you click with the program or
Mm-hmm.
otherwise. And I think it's a really good way to see it that way, Dr. Jenred,
Mm-hmm.
again. And I do appreciate that you emphasize that people don't need to have very unconventional
Yes.
pursuits outside of medicine, that
Mm-hmm.
if even the ones within it, such as research and so forth, are
Yeah.
just as excellent as long as you're able to communicate them. But getting to that step in interviews, if you don't mind me asking,
Mm-hmm.
I know you mentioned I know you mentioned community medicine versus academic medicine,
Mm-hmm.
staying within the city versus otherwise. And I know Alan here extended a very excellent question in the chat. They asked,
Mm-hmm.
how important is it for a program to know if you're going to stay in the area? Having those questions in mind, how would you recommend somebody to begin building their their institutions list to see who they're going to be applying to? Because I know you also mentioned some only taking their own and so forth. So
Mm-hmm.
how would you recommend people to strategize that list that they're going to be building to apply to?
Oh, you mean for like for the rank list or
Yeah.
for like where to? Because you want to apply everywhere, right? So you
Ah,
want to
mm,
apply you want to apply to every single program within your specialty,
mm,
and then because you have to, as an IMG, you have to apply everywhere. But then, when you are then, invited to interviews, you obviously, when you are preparing for the interview, you have to read everything about the program. You have to know who you're going to be, working with, whatever you can find, on the internet, Facebook, whatever people have out there, you need to read, so that you can also try to connect with people that way. Like for example, I also um during my med school, I did rotation. Basically, I went to Tanzania to volunteer, as a medical student,
mm,
and ended up also founding a nonprofit that we helped, like we worked with a hospital in Tanzania for the time for a while. And my program director that from Mercy is where I ended up going into for residency. He also had experience with volunteering, in Kenya, so also that was something we connected with. And I knew it because before the interview, I read that online, I saw it on Facebook. So it's important to,
mm,
prepare in that way so you can connect with people.
mm,
But then, even if you don't have, so they obviously look, do you have family in the area, any kind of ties to the area? It's just, they want to know like how serious you are about coming to that program, because they also, especially if they're smaller programs, they the fear is probably that they might not fill all the spots.
right.
So they want to be sure, the people who like for example, let's say that let's say like let's say an example of the program, that I'm in. We had some applicants, that had really strong CVs, high scores, and let's say like a lot of research, or maybe some unconventional like tutoring. Those were really strong candidates, but I suspect that they're probably going into other institutions, that might be were looking for something else for them. They just applied here because they probably applied broadly. So we might not rank them as high. So again, you might, and there was an applicant she was from India, no ties to the area, a very strong
Mm,
candidate though, just based on I think the research she did, and then just as a person, and we love to have her, but actually we couldn't sponsor her visa. But so, I mean, I think if you're just genuine, and I mean, you can, I think I would advise to look at the area, even if you don't have any family, and try to at least find some things that you can talk about if they ask you why this program, because you want to know. The worst thing to happen is that if they ask you the question and you don't know why, or it's something vague, then that just basically tells them that you're not really interested, in the
Mm,
program.
yes,
So
yes,
just do
no.
your research, before you do the interview.
Yes, got it. No, and I appreciate that strategy, Dr. Jenrette. So essentially, again, applying broadly while
Mm-hmm.
being aware, as you mentioned, that some might have a bias towards their students. A
Mm-hmm.
way to find that out is thankfully nowadays we have a lot of resources online, going as far as, checking even social media. I,
Yeah.
I really like the way social media has exploded in a sense of it being a guidance tool for individuals
Mm-hmm.
applying to the match, whether it be open houses or, as you mentioned, some of the activities that the programs do. I think it definitely gives you that added layer of information beyond
Mm-hmm.
what the program page could mention. The program page mentions one thing, and then you see social media that they do this. And again, I think it's so amazing because not many people not many people quote social media to be a tool in helping you build your application list. And again, it's very important to point that out as well. Now, when it comes to, I know you mentioned the ties and individuals perhaps not having strong ties,
Mm-hmm.
or perhaps those who are applying to more competitive specialties, you need to have more than just ties. Is there
Yes.
anything that you recommend for this approach, again, either not having strong ties or somebody who is
Mm-hmm.
pursuing a more competitive specialty? How would you recommend somebody approaching that, Dr. Jenred?
I think for the competitive specialties, I mean, it's really, I think it's the network, and then I realized that some of it may, be not entirely up like in your control.
Mm,
But I think having somebody advocate for you, like for example, I'm sure I would have got into surgery, it's just that I decided not to do it, but I did have a really strong network. But then I have no family. None of my nobody in my family is a doctor, I don't have any family, and then no friends here. I mean, like, going into much.
mm,
But so at University of Chicago, this was just I went to a conference, and just to give an example how you can build a network. So I did research with my surgery professor in Poland, and then my poster got accepted to American College of Surgery annual conference in San Diego, and that was like 2019, I think.
mhm,
And so I presented there, and then I went to one of the lectures. Obviously, like you have to research the lecture. So I went to one that I really was interested in, and I just decided to approach the speaker, who was um, the leading, researcher in the lab. So I asked him if I can work for his. I asked him. I talked to him, and it was about microbiome. He's one of the leading surgeons that's researching making research in microbiome at the University of Chicago. And I asked him, like, will he have a position, that I would love to work, with him and help and then, volunteer. And, he actually did not have a spot, but then he referred me to my mentor and my former boss at the University of Chicago, ended up doing research fellowship with. So, that's how you can kind of like get in. And then
mhm.
at least, if I try, I would have probably at least gotten an interview there in surgery, not in IM, because I did really didn't know anything IM. So I think network is going to be a huge thing, for the competitive specialties.
Ah,
Also, for the American graduates too, like one of my mentors told me, they had a resident that failed step one and step two, and she was actually in the medical school. And then obviously, like she wouldn't have chance to much anywhere, especially for surgery, which is competitive. But because they knew her, so how she works, they actually ended up interviewing her. She's there, she's like probably close to finishing now, and she's doing really well.
Mhm.
So it's a person like who you know, and then like having one person that advocates for you is really important.
Mhm. Got it, got it. No, and that's a very again, I really like how we've been emphasizing and just really reinforcing, reinstating that importance of building a network, maintaining your network, because both are just as important, building and maintaining. I know Ferris here asked the excellent question of
Hmm.
what would be the two or three things that made the biggest difference in matching as an IMG, both for you and for IMGs that you see
Hmm.
incoming, in addition to the network that they have built? Is there
Yes.
anything else that you have noticed?
I think my research background for me, for sure, because the program that I matched and like all the IM programs, I had no connections, right? So I think it was for sure my research experience and publications, being first author. Um, and then I wonder how much, I mean, I do have an experience of, like founding a nonprofit. I think that's somewhat unusual. So I would say then, probably two. But I would say, and then I have good scores. I don't have crazy good scores, but I do have, good scores in step one when they were still looking at that, and step two. So I think those things,
Got it, got it. So
which are pretty
definitely.
standard, but I mean, that's all it
Mhm,
is. I mean, they really do look at those scores,
mhm.
that and the research for an IMG is important.
Got it, got it. No, and again, I appreciate that you mentioned that, Dr. Jenred. And I am curious to know, and other people are too, with regards to research. I know that has been a strong suit in your journey, both as a medical student, resident, and now something that you noticed is a strong point for individuals. I'm curious to know how are you proceeding in the research realm with regards to innovating research fellowships? How are you integrating your journey into, again, the future of research fellowships for IMGs? I'm really curious to know all about that, Dr. Jenrad.
Meaning, like, just to clarify, like, meaning how I see myself, like, doing it forward, or I guess give me my previous,
I would say a little bit of both.
both, or how to start it.
Definitely starting research is important. So if you don't mind touching up on that,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, and really how your impact, excuse
Mm-hmm.
me, in research has been a guidance for others pursuing research and fellowships.
Okay, so how to start it? I think, because most of my first, studies and, was just like retrospective. So it's not that you're going to design a randomized controlled trial, or you're going to do a prospective research, right? Mainly what you want to just show through the research is that you're able to take on a task that is extracurriculum, and you're
Mm,
able to do it from the beginning to finish. Okay, so that itself speaks for that when you take on a work, you're able to complete something, and make some and create some, and then actually, obviously the purpose of research is that we all learn, and it's a contribution to science, right? So that you also have an impact that is beyond just the one-to-one medicine, right? The clinical encounters. But so the easiest way to start is really just case reports, right? I mean, that's what also I'm teaching the residents now. Actually, none of the residents that I'm working with at 12 never written a case report, so there's all
wow.
kinds of, residents out there.
Mhm,
But yeah, so then they're learning that for the first time, but, having that as a medical student is definitely in your favor. So that, when you're doing your rotations, whichever one is of your interest, you want to express that to the attending that you're with, that you have an interest. I'd like to write a case. I can bet you every single attending has cases that they would like to write, but they have no time for that, so they
mhm,
would gladly, I think, welcome, having somebody take on that role, and then, compose most of it. And then, of course, the name is going to be on it too, but, that way you can get it published. Most of the doctors think that I worked with, they would not put their first name on it, as the author. I was the first author.
Mhm.
So by expressing the interest, to your attending, you want to be actively looking for cases. Maybe you can even write a case series, if you're attending, there's also some attendees that are not interested. So you want to at least, ask a few and then see who is more into it, because you're going to be identified that pretty quickly. There's some attendees that have tons of cases, and then they just waiting to be written. Maybe some will even give you ideas for research, or like even a retrospective or meta-analysis. Those are easier things to do, than doing a retrospective study. So it doesn't have to be like super impressive, just again, this will be like the start. So I think the first one I did was I think it was a case. And then I know I did retrospective analysis, like retrospective studies within the surgical department.
Mhm.
So basically just, asking, and then expressing an interest. And I'm sure that people are things that they thought about, but they simply have no time to do it. And then so you can for sure help. I mean, even in residency, I would, when I was trying to, because we did have an expectation that, we had to do a research project for residency, and also, to march to fellowship, you have to do it. So I also seek help from medical students so they can help me, so that the help is needed, and then that way you can also, get in your foot into it. And again, it can be as simple as just a case report.
Nice. Got it, got it. So again, doesn't have to be anything crazy flashy, just as
Yeah.
long as it gives the individual that knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
it exposes them to the
Yes.
environment of research. Nice. And then from there, that can continue to open doors or just continue being part of
Yes.
the person's story in how they're committed to their field. I think it's really important that you mentioned that, Dr. Jenred. And on the topic of that, I will also be sharing the link to our research community here at IMG Helping Hands, if you don't mind. As I mentioned this
Mm-hmm.
morning, I just did an orientation with individuals who are just going to start their research module anytime between today and in the coming days, and just getting to connect with the students, getting to connect with other health professionals such as yourself is something that I enjoy doing. And with regards to just external things, something that I was curious about. I know you mentioned your journey in motherhood as well. I know I saw modeling too in the poster for today's webinar as well, and public outreach. With everything that you're doing, Dr. Jenright, how are you able to balance it all? It all sounds amazing.
I think there's no balance, I don't know. I don't, that the term work-life balance, I'm not sure, I think there has to be some better term. I think it's maybe with like work-life integration, more so than balance. Um, I mean, I struggle, I have to be honest, like I have my husband who's very supportive. He's not a physician, he's an engineer and he works from home, which if that was not there, then I don't know how we would have done it, but our family, so like his family's in a different state. My family is in Poland. So we really don't have anybody to fall back on. So it's just us. And, he's doing a lot of, like, um, taking care of our daughter, drop off pickups. I can't do any of it. My attending job, it's just the hours, won't let me. But so I wish I could be more involved, but then at the same time, I think, when you're young and you have opportunities, I think it's important that, you pursue them. Um, I think overall, um, I think at this point extremely busy, maybe like edging on being too busy, with all the projects.
They also
But
really fun though.
the modeling, is unexpected, which I really enjoyed it. I was not planning, to do anything like that. But I thought, I think it was I was doing a photo shoot just for my daughter because I wanted her to be a baby model because she's really pretty. She's mixed race, and then ended up just taking some professional pictures with a photographer for me because I just wanted it for like if I'm going to be using it for social media. And then I talked to her. Then I was thinking maybe I could do something like I would love to collaborate with Wear Figs or like one of those healthcare brands. And I think she
Mhm.
connected me with Zain, when they were looking for models. So it's just
Oh,
kind of
nice.
a coincidence, but I think a really great one. And
Mm,
I don't know. I think, with all of this, in order
mm,
to um I think to be successful, whether it's matching, I think it comes with a lot of sacrifice, but then you also have to be extremely organized. That's how I'm able to do it because I'm extremely
yes.
organized. And again, like I say, I struggle, but then I try to also maintain, like, healthy habits and work out. I get up at like 5 in the morning, and like I've been work and then this past week it's been like 4:30 because I'm doing edits for
Mm,
questions for the question bank. So again, that sounds like a sacrifice, right? I think you have to really like what you do, and then also, even if it's something that you may not fully agree with, you have to see a point in it, and just because you have to have a drive in order to get up at 4:30 in the morning and do work before you go to actual work.
mhm,
So I would say no, like not so much work-life balance, but like maybe work-life integration. I do
mm,
work on
mhm,
the weekends too for like with the residency program, but it's because it's important to me. Um, so I do feel like, again, it might seem like I'm working all the time, but the
mhm,
things that I'm doing, you want to keep your options open too.
mm,
I
mhm.
think also with just like where we have AI, and you want to be flexible.
Yeah.
And again, like also like what I kind of like touched on earlier, what you might imagine as yourself now, it's probably where you may work in the same place, 10 years from now. But I think our generation, I'm a millennial, I think we're more like about reevaluating if we don't like something and then just moving on. And then you have to have an open mind.
Mhm.
So that's why
Definitely.
pursuing few opportunities, when they come along, and they might
Mhm,
require more, time commitment or sacrifice, in the short term. But I think, I think at the end is worth it, but then I did go through burnout during residency, and
mhm,
it's a terrible place to be. So I've also like developed some mechanism over time where I'm working on it myself, so
mhm,
I know where I can get too busy and what happens then. That's where I know like the bad place that I can get to with that
mhm,
burnout that I experience, so through sleep deprivation for the most part.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
So I think
mhm,
you have to take care of yourself first to be able to take care of other people.
mhm,
But I know where you guys are and like what I've been through. I've been sleep deprived, but there's also different levels of it.
mhm,
But at the end of the day, you also have to take care of yourself, and
mhm,
sometimes, studying 1 more hour is not going to get you anywhere, and maybe it's like working out that will get you better results, so you can take care of your body too.
mhm. I know, definitely, definitely. And I all throughout this conversation, Dr. Jenred, throughout this webinar, again, I really do appreciate just all of these very important introspective components that you've really touched on because again, going through the match process, going through the residency journey, yes, it is very much academic, it is very much clinical, but something that not very many people talk about is, again, that personal component of knowing yourself, of finding yourself, or as you mentioned, reinventing yourself. And that is something that doesn't get talked about often or enough, I would say. So I really do appreciate that that was touched those topics were touched up on. They were relayed through the maintenance and the creation of your network. It's
Mhm.
staying true to yourself. I really love also the way with everything that you mentioned all throughout your story, Dr. Genered. You really seem very much yourself. Some people, again, with everything that goes on, you feel like you lose yourself, or again, you
Mhm.
feel like you tend to lose yourself to your job. You're out here being a motivator, being a model, not just a photography model, but being a role model, being an
Mhm.
academic, being an AP. Again, I think it's amazing, and doing so with, as you mentioned, coping with burnout, preventing burnout, and knowing those strategies. So Again, I really do appreciate this talk. And lastly, the organization aspect, Dr. Jenred, if you don't mind me asking just one last question,
Mm-hmm.
just touching up on that organization aspect before we finish today's webinar. I know Syed mentioned here that he just passed step one. By the way, congrats, Syed. And I know that a lot of individuals in this webinar are in this journey as well. They are either newly graduated or they have just graduated, but we're all IMGs, or for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
individuals are IMGs. He's interested to know, do you recommend him starting research before step two, or doing step two, observerships, or as you mentioned, doing a little bit of everything? Because as you've shown, it can all be done. What do you recommend, if you don't mind me asking, Dr. Jenred?
Yeah, and then I think depends where he is in his journey, probably doing things in parallel will be ideal because, when you work on a project, depending what it is, it might take time for you to do it, especially if you're working with somebody else, right? So I think probably just doing things alongside each other. But they really, I think, is very individualized. It depends on your time frame too.
Mhm.
Because if you have a 1 year, well, yes, you want to be doing, observerships, and you want to be doing research, and you want to do step two as well. If you have a gap year, you can do all of that, right? If you have medical school, well, that probably, like you have to um strategize differently.
Mhm.
So it'll be probably, like very, very individualized, based where you are in your training.
Sure.
But I think in general, you want to do things in parallel
Mhm.
because
I
again,
got
those
it.
are things that can coexist. Like I mean, I realized that a lot of people, I mean, we have different, well, there's not maybe that many learning styles, but I think there are people who are there for the long course, like me. So I prefer to study, like over a course of a year or two for something,
Mhm.
and I just have different cycles of studying. So like, for example, if I prepare for my board examination, I'm going to start, actually, I took step three before residency. That's also important to mention. So that helped. So then, like, if I knew I'm going to be passing boards in 3 years, well, I already start preparing. So some people cram or they just wait till the third year to start working on something. So there are people who cram. I probably would discourage that because then you forget the knowledge, and you really need to have a really strong knowledge of foundation to take care of people. We're not APRNs or physician assistants. We don't w- um, we use clinical reasoning in our work, so it's not just protocol based, and you need a strong foundation of knowledge. Um, but I was gonna say, yeah, you have to plan, for so you can have a few things going on. You just have to keep track of it. In terms of like preparation for step two, or like those consecutive projects, like I think in residency, what I did because I mean, imagine like you're working full time, sometimes like 80-hour weeks and sometimes even more. And then you expected to present journal clubs, mortality, morbidity clinic, I mean, like presentations. You have expectation to do cases, expectations to do quality projects and research. So I just create a table. So, even when as a step, even when you're early on, you need to like create those habits where you are doing things in parallel, and make it work, whether it's a spreadsheet, which is the easiest. And then you just track your progress and you like with yourself, you check in where you are. Maybe you have a mentor that can help you with that, but maybe it's just with yourself. You do like that's what I've always done, you do check-ins periodically where you are with your studying, where you are with your cases, what's the progress, what do you need to get the work done, kind of thing. I think you might be muted.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for helping us build this strategy, Dr. Jenrich.
Hmm.
And just really quick before we go, are there any last words that you would like to give to our viewers, individuals here in the webinar, something that you like to share, Dr. Jenrich?
I think the last thing is probably just, like if people tell you that is impossible, there is no such thing as impossible. And there's going to be a lot of sacrifices along the way. It's going to be, I don't want to say difficult. Somebody told me not to use word as difficult as tough. You just want to say challenging because you want to, if you set your mindset as something is tough or difficult, then automatically you set yourself for failure. So don't use these words. And then just, yes, things are going to be challenging, but you can do it. Yes, you have to expect, then, you're going to work really hard. But I think at the end, I think you all, have really strong chances of matching. And you will look back and, I can tell you, like in my residency, I look back and I think like my medical education was a lot stronger than some of these American medical graduates. And so I know that a lot of us as IMGs have like insecurity and feel like we're inferior, but that's not true. That's not necessarily true. A lot of us work a lot harder, and then the American graduates have no idea how to work this hard. And that's something I want you to remember, because um, it's something that will make you stand out wherever you go.
I got it. No, thank you so much once again for your motivating words, Dr. Jenred. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this very introspective webinar. Again, something that not many people talk about, the personal component of it, of
Mhm.
knowing yourself and using that to guide yourself throughout the match journey, throughout, again, your overall medical journey. So thank you so much for guiding us through that, Dr. Jenner.
Can I ask? There's one question there. Can I answer the question in the
Sure.
in the
Yes,
group
yes,
chat?
go ahead.
There's a question about how do you weigh martial arts while choosing candidate in extracurricular section along with Spanish fluency to a candidate? So actually, I did my first class in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu right before this webinar. I also do Muay Thai.
Nice.
I love this question. How would you explain this? So, you can say, like, for example, what I found. So with martial arts, I wish that I've learned it as a child, but I think like martial arts really teaches you discipline, and I think you learn a lot about yourself and your body. And like I think like it is like another level of awareness that comes for that. I think also what martial art teaches you is how to be a beginner in something. Any kind of new thing that you pick up, it is I think you have to set your ego aside. If you want to really learn something, you have to set your so this is something you can talk about in an interview. So like why is that something you want to point out? So you have to set an ego aside if you want to be a beginner in something. And it was extremely difficult for me or I shouldn't say difficult, it was challenging when I picked up Muay Thai. And then now I just did my first lesson in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you have to have an open mind. And that's what martial art teaches you, how to be a beginner, how to set your ego aside, and then over time things will come. But again, it's just the repetition. So that's the other thing that it teaches you. So I mean that translates into medicine too. In order to be good at something, you need a repetition. You need to do thousands of questions if you want to do really well on your steps, right? Spanish fluency, well, obviously, like if there's an area that you're applying, like for example Southern California, and then with the program that I'm with that's a huge strength because a lot of there were the population that there's a lot of Spanish speakers. We would love to have, and I'm sure programs would love to have a candidate that can speak Spanish fluently, or even maybe not as fluently, but then to a level you can communicate with patients. I think a lot of that would be a huge strength.
Mhm. Wow.
And yeah, I
Yes.
know there's probably more questions, but I don't have
No,
any experience with ophthalmology. I know that it's hard.
no, no, but again, I do appreciate but again, I do
Yeah,
appreciate your time once again, Dr. Jenner. And I feel like we could talk for hours and days with all
probably.
of no, with all of the amazing
I know
stories
it.
that you have. They've all been amazing, and the assessments that you've provided the individual, to the viewers and here in the webinar as well, and how to assess your skills, how to sell yourself, how to plan out your residency journey. Again, all of this is so invaluable, Dr. Jenner. And again, I cannot thank you enough for your
I
time, for your advice, and also to the viewers for asking those amazing questions, providing input, and for your amazing comments. So, again, I think once again, let me just share our research community in the instance that anybody has any additional questions with regards to either starting, continuing your research journey, or if you have any more personalized questions regarding how to go about your match journey as well. But other than that, I think we'll definitely conclude our webinar here,
and
Dr.
actually just one
Jenred.
more. Sorry,
Yes,
I
no,
just I
go
saw
ahead,
one
go
more
ahead.
question in the chat box. So
Sure,
about
go ahead,
burnout.
Dr.
I know we're going over
Yes.
time, but I just want to briefly mention, like
No,
how to
no,
deal
it's
with
important.
burnout. It's
Yes,
probably
yes, go ahead.
it could be a whole webinar on that. But one advice my attending gave me, when I was going through it, they told me to step away and take time off in any way that it's possible, and it will be different for whatever point in your journey you are. For me, like as a resident, so that was like PGY 1, PGY 2 going on PGY 3, it meant that I do bare minimum, doesn't mean that my, work suffers. Like I still need to take care of patients, but anything extra, anything is going to be, not as big of a priority, any way that so the way to, I think deal with that is stepping away from medicine. And
Mhm,
if it means actually, if it means truly taking time off, meaning taking a month off, that's what you need to do.
mhm, mhm,
If it means taking a few months off, that's what you have to do. But if you have to work, if you still have to do it, you can't just take literally time off, then you have to find a way that you take time off for yourself and you have some contained time where you're not doing anything medicine related. And whatever it is that brings you joy, maybe it's going to, like jujitsu, or maybe it's, I mean, exercise, whatever it is, maybe it's spending more time cooking, or maybe it's spending time with your family. You have the time, and then I think that also what makes you a better physician is having time away from medicine.
mhm, mhm.
So
Got it.
that's maybe to conclude
Yes,
this
no, thank
session.
God, I know. And thank you so much once again, Dr. Jenred. Again, thank you for your invaluable advice that you shared. Everybody, people in the webinar, thank you for your questions and comments. Once again, for more individualized help, be sure to join the research community. And I will definitely be concluding our webinar now. Thank you once again, Dr. Jenred, for being
Thank you
here.
so
Our
much.
viewers, thank you so much once again. As always, guys, don't forget to stay connected in social media so that you can see what our next topics are going to be about. I'll definitely be pitching out that wellness and burnout that you mentioned as well, Dr. Jenred, and viewers. But as always, definitely stay connected, and we'll see you on the next one, guys. Have a
Thank you so much
wonderful
again.
day, afternoon, and evening. Thank you so much.